Beneath the shine of every golden age, there's a quiet truth most people miss. Wealth has never been safe. Not in empires, not during revolutions, not even in those supposedly calm decades between wars. From the palaces of Babylon to the villas of ancient Rome, the wealthy have always played a very different game than everyone else. They understood something early on. Money, whether it took the form of gold coins, grain, or land deeds, was never just about comfort. It was about leverage, protection, and survival. While ordinary people trusted the system, the elite learned how to protect themselves from the system. The real question isn't how they became rich. The question that actually matters is how they stayed rich when everything around them started falling apart. To understand that, we need to go back to the earliest examples of concentrated wealth. Back then, being rich didn't mean a large balance somewhere. It meant controlling resources that others couldn't easily touch. In Mesopotamian city-states, more than 4,000 years ago, wealthy merchants and rulers didn't just lock their silver in vaults. They tied their wealth into temple loans, farmland leases, and trade monopolies that stretched across rivers and deserts. Sumerian kings ruling cities like Ur and Lagash wrapped their fortunes in religion itself. Temples weren't just places of worship, they were the central banks of the ancient world. Seizing temple assets wasn't just political suicide, it was religious sacrilege. That spiritual shield made elite wealth almost untouchable. Ancient Egypt used a similar strategy. During the Old and Middle Kingdoms, wealth wasn't stored mainly in coins, but in tangible, durable assets. Fertile land along the Nile, massive grain reserves, gold mines in Nubia. These weren't things you could confiscate without tearing the state apart. The elite even used early trust-like arrangements, dedicating land to temple estates so it would pass safely to their heirs, regardless of political shifts. If you were wealthy in ancient Egypt, inflation or currency collapse wasn't your main worry. Your wealth lived in land, and land produced food, the ultimate store of value in a fragile world. By classical Greece in the 5th century BCE, we see a different strategy emerge: diversification through mobility. Greek merchants in Athens, Corinth, and the Aegean Islands made their fortunes through maritime trade. They knew a coup or a war could wipe out wealth tied to a single city. So they spread their assets across multiple city-states, invested in ships, and built relationships with bankers in ports as far away as Egypt and the Black Sea. This was an early form of offshore diversification, not hidden accounts, but physically scattered wealth. If Athens fell, a smart merchant could simply sail elsewhere and start again. Rome took this idea even further. Roman elites, senators, generals, and the famously wealthy equestrian class, understood political danger better than most. They lived through dictatorships, purges, and mass confiscations under figures like Sulla and Julius Caesar. Fortunes disappeared overnight if you backed the wrong side, so they adapted. The richest Romans didn't hold everything in coin. They owned land across multiple provinces, invested in tax farming contracts, and loaned money to foreign kings and cities, loans backed by Roman military power. They also moved portable wealth, gold, jewels, art, far from political rivals. In modern terms, they weren't just diversifying assets, they were diversifying jurisdictions. During the collapse of the Western Roman Empire in the 4th and 5th centuries, this strategy became even clearer. As the state lost control, elite families shifted wealth away from public obligations and into private protection. They stopped lending to an imperial treasury that might never repay and instead invested in fortified estates, private forces, and direct trade networks. When Rome officially fell in 476, the treasury was empty. But the great families still controlled land, food, and labor. The state vanished. Their wealth didn't. The medieval world brought new risks and new tools. Between the 11th and 15th centuries in Europe, wealthy merchants and nobles used the church as both a vault and a legal shield. Kings often seized assets to fund wars, but property donated to the church was largely untouchable. Wealthy families could park assets in monasteries, protected by religious law, and managed through trusted abbots. Banking families like the Medici combined this with innovations like bills of exchange, early paper credit that allowed wealth to move across borders without hauling gold. A Medici banker could be ruined in one city and still wealthy in another because his capital existed as ledger entries in distant markets. In the Islamic world's golden age, from the 8th to the 13th century, merchants developed similarly advanced systems. The Hawala network allowed money to move across vast distances without physically moving cash. It relied on trust, reputation, and family honor, making it extremely difficult for rulers to seize. Wealth was also invested in caravans, real estate, and long-term trade monopolies that produced income even during political chaos. The rule was always the same: spread risk, stay mobile, and keep part of your wealth invisible. As centralized states grew stronger in the early modern period, elites adapted again. Merchant families in Venice, Amsterdam, and London tied their fortunes to the state, but on their own terms. They bought government debt, financed wars, supplied fleets, and provided essential loans in exchange for privileges and exemptions. This made them too valuable to attack. Governments squeezed ordinary people harder during crises, while the most connected merchants often emerged even wealthier. So what does all of this tell us? That protecting wealth has always come down to two things: control and distance. Control means owning assets that produce value regardless of politics: land, resources, trade access. Distance means spreading those assets across different systems, places, and forms of money, so no single event can wipe everything out. The wealthy of the past understood something many still don't. Wealth fully trapped inside the official system is wealth at risk. And that lesson matters more today than ever. We live in a world of instant freezes and digital seizures. Bank accounts can be locked with a click. Currencies can be devalued overnight. Markets can crash in days. Inflation can quietly eat away your purchasing power year after year. The ancient elite never trusted the state with everything they owned, and neither should you. The tools today are different: international diversification, precious metals, alternative assets, but the principle hasn't changed. History doesn't repeat exactly, but the same traps keep appearing. People assume stability will last forever until it doesn't. The wealthy of the past didn't wait for disaster before acting. They moved early, spread risk, and protected long-term value. That's real financial freedom. Not just having money, but making sure it survives the storm. If there's one lesson to take from history, it's this: the system works best for those who know how to work around it. Everyone else learns too late that their safe money was never truly under their control. If this gave you a new perspective, hit subscribe. History has the answers, and I'll show you where to look.